It probably didn't work out how he'd planned it to, but he's got to realise that those magic fingers, they've brought joy to millions of children worldwide, and not a lot of people can say that. And those that can probably shouldn't.
Come on, you don't need to be behind the curtain. Come on, it's all right. Can't be that bad. Oh my! Put it away! Put it away! Fuck me! Oh, we'll get an interpreter. Bloody hell.
He says that when he became an actor, it wasn't what he had expected it to be. He'd learnt from all the greats: De Niro, Christopher Walken, Claire Sweeney. He says what you've just seen there is 2 hours of television gold. He says, but what you don't see is the work that goes into a scene like that. And in fact, it was behind the curtain once for 53 hours.
Well, Handy Andy was a man that was so creative when we started that whenever he masturbated, he would come origami. It's a shame he can't do that now because of the serious medical condition that he's in.
It probably didn't work out how he'd planned it to, but he's got to realise that those magic fingers, they've brought joy to millions of children worldwide, and not a lot of people can say that. And those that can
probably shouldn't. And as a child, you met Handy Andy, didn't you?
Can we not talk about him, please? Thanks. He gave a bloody good first audition, and there was actually talk of him becoming the presenter, which would have been good. There was an incident with a piping hot mushroom soup, which by all accounts flew across the room, straight into his face, burning it completely. He says it was absolute sabotage. I mean, how can mushroom soup fly across the room and burn a face down to the bone like that? He says somebody clearly didn't want him to have the role. It's funny because I was in the canteen that day, but nobody told me about mushroom soup. I think I was stuck with the risotto.
Well, it's one thing that people do talk about a lot, that the only person who was eating soup on set that day was Andy.
Hang on a second. We had a canteen. I was living off paint for a couple of weeks.
And the only person who was given very extreme serious burns with soup that should never really be that hot was the one person that was preventing Andy from being the host on the program. So there are rumours.
He said that he'd never get the role now anyway because he's hideous, and obviously have to be very attractive to be a television presenter. His face was in no shape to be the presenter of a children's television show, and so the role was offered to me. So every cloud. He said, but there was a role for him if he could handle it. They asked him if he was good with his hands, and he said, he'd played a peeping Tom on EastEnders, so he had to be. And the rest is history, where he'd like most of it to stay, really. He says that every day was torture. The other crew members would smear shit on his hands, sometimes even burn him with live fires. They beat him up. Oh, no. They beat him down to rock bottom. And people say, why don't you just get a girlfriend? And he says that's impossible when you look like him.
People talk about how difficult it is to look him right in the eyes because it's very difficult to know where the eyes are. And it's like a Medusa type situation. When you look him directly in the eyes, you turn to stone, or in this case, you turn to throw up.
The only women that he sees are the pharmacists. And what's he going to do? Say, oh, my face is gammy. How about dinner? Of course, they'd say no, and then he'd ask for some extra large condoms, please. They'd still say no, and he'd say, just the cream then, please.
If you imagine if you made a candle of a gargoyle, and then you slightly melted it, and it was red, well, that's more or less how Handy Andy looks now. And I can see why you wouldn't want to show that to children. I can't see why it's any worse than the rest of the material in the program, but he really is god awful to look at. He's not looking good.
Of course, he'd go back in an hour later and ask a different pharmacist for his real condoms, extra small. He says he doesn't even know if you need condoms when you're only using your hand. And he shits himself daily.